Hello and welcome to Geography Rocks. In today's video we're going to look at typhoons. The first image is a world map which shows the location of tropical storms. An examiner might give you something like this and might ask you to either describe the location of these storms or to describe the distribution of them. Remember, distribution means where they are and where they're not. Note how the examiner has given us a shaded area which shows where the tropical storms are, as well as the equator. Let's take a look at where they locate. Tropical storms are huge storms called hurricanes, typhoons and cyclones. They form 5 to 15 degrees north and south of the equator, where ocean temperatures need to be above 27 degrees. The examiner would also expect you to be able to describe how they form. In order to do that, take a look at this information. Rising air draws evaporated water vapour up from the ocean surface. This cools and condenses and forms thunderstorm clouds. The condensing releases heat, which draws up more water vapour and powers the storm. The Coriolis effect spins the storm at over 75 miles per hour. On reaching land, the energy supply, the evaporated water, is cut off and the storm weakens. Let's take a look at Typhoon Haiyan. In this example we've been given two maps. The one at the bottom is a world map where in red you can see the word Philippines. The top map shows the track that Typhoon Haiyan took. Let's take a look at the exam question. Use figure 1 to describe the track of Typhoon Haiyan. Remember, the word track means the direction that it took. On a real exam paper, you would undoubtedly have a compass and you should look to use north, east, south or west in your response. Remember, we've talked about imagining ourselves as the little man on Google. First off, imagining that we're outside the world looking down at the world. So we start at the world map. Then we zoom in to the close-up map. Let's take a look at a response to this question. Figure 1 shows that Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines in Southeast Asia. The typhoon travelled in a westerly direction through Tacloban and then turned northwesterly as it approached Vietnam. Notice how I've told the examiner that I'm using figure 1. Notice how I started off with the world map identifying the location of the Philippines, and then I zoomed myself in to the Philippines area and talked about how the track went over Tacloban and then travelled northwesterly as it approached Vietnam, using compass points, place names and continents. Let's take a look at some other figures that we might see in an exam paper. Remember, we must always look at the figures first. So figure 5, I can see a rescue operation going on, searching perhaps for bodies or survivors. In figure 6, I can see a house that has recently been built, and underneath it says, together with the Philippine Red Cross, the ICRC has built nearly 4,500 storm-resilient houses for vulnerable families on Samar Island. Each house is equipped with its own sanitation facilities. The question says, using figures 5 and 6 and your own knowledge, evaluate immediate and long-term responses to hurricanes. The immediate response in figure 5 shows search and rescue. In order to evaluate, I need to say how it's going to help. Well, it's going to reduce the death toll. Second thing I need to know is in figure 6, I can see some long-term responses. They've built resilient homes which will help locals not only feel more safe, but also protect them in the future. Using my own knowledge, I know that some other immediate responses are to provide aid. Non-governmental organisations, NGOs, sometimes provide field hospitals or evacuation centres. Long-term, the United Nations financial aid can help support a country going forward. Infrastructure needs to be quickly repaired, and things such as rice and fishing needs to be quickly re-established. Long-term, building cyclone shelters provides safety for the locals should another cyclone or typhoon occur. Now that I've used both figures and my own knowledge, I'm ready to build up my response to that question. Let's plan our response. Start with immediate responses. I'm going to use figure 5 and then I'm going to evaluate that and say how it benefited the people. Then I'm going to use my own knowledge of immediate responses and say how they benefited people. Then I will switch and I will use figure 6 and talk about long-term responses and how they benefit the people. And then I'll use my own knowledge of long-term responses and say how they benefited the people. So I've split my answer into use figure 5, short-term responses, my own knowledge of short-term responses, and then I'm going to shift my attention to long-term responses. I'm going to use figure 6 and then my own knowledge. In order to evaluate, I must make it clear that I understand how each thing benefits the people. Let's take a look at a response. Using figures 5 and 6 and your own knowledge, evaluate immediate and long-term responses to hurricanes. In figure 5, search and rescue are providing an immediate response. This helped reduce the overall death toll. In addition, recovering any bodies quickly, this reduced the chance of disease spreading. After Haiyan, other immediate responses included NGOs providing aid, immediate food and blankets helped victims and reduced illness. Field hospitals were quickly established. Again, this helped reduce the death toll and prevented the wounded becoming more infected by infection. Evacuation centres were set up, which provided a safe place for victims and helped them establish where people were. I've used figure 5 and then I've talked about other immediate responses, and each time I've tried to talk about how they've helped. Figure 6 shows new homes built to provide greater shelter in the future. This will help reduce death tolls if another typhoon hits, and it will also reassure the people living in the area. Other long-term responses include rebuilding infrastructure, which means that businesses can resume and people can start to rebuild their lives and get back to work. Other long-term responses are to help people re-establish rice crops and fishing. This means that people can feed themselves again and reduces the chance of malnutrition. Cyclone shelters can be built, which helps people to feel safer and provides valuable shelter if another typhoon hits the area, and could reduce the impact of future cyclones. Notice how I've gone from figure 5 to figure 6. My answer makes sense and it's in order. I do hope this little video has been of use to you. My name's Mrs. Wingham and you've been listening to Geography Rocks.